She was shivering, searching trash for rags, until he covered her in a blanket and said, "Come home." The sentence he'd signed had sealed the fate of 10,000 children. That was what people whispered anyway. Emil Thorne had once filled auditoriums, lecturing on neural resonance and interspecies empathy. Now his boots sloshed through waste runoff on Solace Ring 11, logging ghost data into consoles that hadn't connected to central systems in years. He didn't mind the silence. It was kinder than questions. Low gravity made everything behave strangely. Fluids clung to surfaces in trembling blobs before sliding away reluctantly. Steam drifted upward, like smoke in a dream, and even dust moved with ghostly hesitation. Drips echoed seconds late through the tunnels, echoing in places no one had walked in weeks. On level 9G, sound didn't travel. It recoiled. This sector was unofficially condemned. A scribbled warning in red paint still marked the bulkhead. No airlock repairs, breach at own risk. Power flickered, pipes hissed, and the air recycling unit gave off a sour, metallic tang that clung to the back of the throat. Officially, Emil was forbidden to walk this far into the maintenance zone, but the risk was low, unless one of the security drones rewrote it early. He was halfway through the derelict corridor when movement caught his eye. Something hunched beside a filtration bin. Slow, ragged, deliberate. An arm, maybe. A leg. Then he heard it. Not crying, not speech. Shivering. She crouched in the dim light, trying to burrow into the heat vent like an animal. Her skin was a shade of green he'd never seen in living tissue. Deep jade shimmering faintly beneath grime and bruises. One foot was bare, pressed directly to the vent grill. The other was wrapped in something melted and blackened, fused to her calf. Her clothes, or what was left of them, looked scavenged from insulation wrap, plastic filament, and ash-streaked tape. Her elbows were raw. Her fingers bled where she'd scratched through debris too sharp to sort. Long white hair, tangled and streaked with soot, veiled her face. She didn't flinch when he approached, didn't look up, just kept digging, methodically, hopelessly. He knelt, unclipped the thermal blanket from his chest strap, and draped it over her gently, without a word. She froze. Her breath stuttered. Her eyes lifted, sharp and too bright in the dark. Pure silver, catching every filament of ambient light. No anger, no fear. Just a question. What's the cost? "I'm not here to hurt you," Emil said quietly. "You were shivering." She stared, then hoarse and rapid. "I wasn't showing myself. I wasn't signaling. I'm not registered for purchase. You can't file claim." "I'm not trying to claim anything. I'm not a pleasure asset. I'm not bait. If this is a sting, It's not." Her breathing trembled, but she didn't move away. Just shrank beneath the blanket like she expected him to rip it back. He didn't. Instead, he pulled off his gloves and placed a protein bar on the floor beside her. The wrapper glinted under the emergency light, untouched. "Come with me," he said after a beat. "I've got heat, food, a cot you can use. You can leave whenever you want. No locks, no questions." Still, she didn't touch the bar. Her gaze flicked to it, then back to him. "Why risk yourself?" That made him pause. Her voice wasn't angry. It was flat, desperate to believe he was lying. The kind of voice that had learned long ago kindness meant payment, that shelter meant trade. His throat tightened. "I used to study people like you," he admitted. "Watch them from behind glass. I measured their silence, wrote papers on how they flinched." Her expression didn't change. "I never asked if they wanted to be there," he added. A sound cracked overhead, just a vent cycling, but her shoulders jerked reflexively. Trauma response, not nerves. Programmed stillness, now frayed. Emil glanced down the corridor. His HUD pinged a proximity warning. Security drone sweep in 15 minutes. His ID wouldn't cover her presence here. He glanced back at her. "We need to move." She didn't ask where. Didn't ask who he was. She just looked at the protein bar, then at his face again. "I don't want to go back in a crate," she whispered. "You won't." Another pause. Then slowly she reached out. Not for him, but for the food. Her fingers curled around it shakily, like expecting it to vanish. She didn't eat, just held it. He stood and took a step back, giving her room. A few beats passed. Then 1 foot at a time she stood, legs trembling under her, but upright. She held the blanket tightly around her frame. As they walked, she asked just once, "Do you know who I am?" "No," he said. "Not yet." Behind them, the wall flickered with static from a broken display screen. A headline, half visible through the distortion, scrolled again and again in faded text. Cellar Royal Biological. Status redacted. He didn't see it, but he would remember her eyes. Silver. Like the lost ones from the case files no one was allowed to open. The walk back to his unit wasn't long, but it felt like crossing a border no one had named. Emil kept his steps slow, measured. Just enough to lead, never enough to pressure. Behind him, she moved like she expected the corridor to vanish. Silent and tentative. Her bare foot dragging slightly, her other legs stiff with pain beneath the fused wrap. The thermal blanket hung from her shoulders, catching on exposed pipe ends and rusted corners. The station groaned around them, metal flexing against the cold. Steam seeped from joints in the wall, curling through the corridor like breath in winter. Low gravity turned everything dreamlike. Liquid pooled instead of dripping. Dust hung in the air, like suspended ash. He saw her glance once at a drop of condensation hovering midair, before it slid, slow and heavy, along the wall. She never spoke. Neither did he. At one junction, Emil's HUD pulsed. Security sweep, 8 minutes. He didn't speed up, just kept walking. Every movement calm, practiced. No sudden gestures, no noise beyond the quiet shuffle of boots on steel. They reached his hatch with 4 minutes to spare. He keyed in the manual override, fingerprint, passphrase, blink sequence, then looked back. She stood behind him, motionless, the hood of the blanket shadowing her face. His door slid open with a hydraulic sigh. Inside, the air was warm, recycled just enough to be breathable but thick with metallic tang. The room was compact. A wall-mounted cot, food unit, and low bench near the heat duct. No windows, just soft amber light, easy on the eyes. He'd lived here 3 years and never made it feel like home. She hesitated in the doorway. "No surveillance," he said gently. "No auto locks." Still, she didn't move. Then she stepped inside. Emil stayed near the entrance, hands loose at his sides. She passed him without comment, scanning the space with sharp, flickering eyes. Her fingers flexed under the blanket like she was counting exits. Her breathing was shallow but steady. He saw the moment she identified the corners. 2 blind spots, 1 vent she might fit through if she had to. Then she sat. Not on the cot, but on the floor, back to the heat panel. He didn't approach, just moved to the food unit, keyed in a basic nutrient request. Broth, neutral base, high calorie. "You hungry?" She didn't respond. When the dispenser chimed, he poured the contents into a heat-safe bowl and set it near her feet. Not close enough to touch, not angled to imply anything, just there. Steam rose gently. She stared at it. He sat on the far side of the room, picked up his own bowl, and ate, slowly, quietly. After a minute, she reached forward. Her fingers trembled so badly the broth sloshed as she lifted it. She sipped, too fast, and winced as the heat hit her throat. But she kept drinking. Her second sip was steadier. Emil didn't look at her while she ate. He focused on his own meal, the hum of the heater, the way his shoulders ached from staying too still. Then she said, "I thought it was poison." He looked up. She kept her eyes on the empty bowl. "First thought, when you handed me food, was it poison or tranquilizer? Second thought was, what if it's real? And third," he asked softly, "does it matter?" "It does to me." She said nothing. Her hand cradled the bowl like it had weight beyond its mass. "You live here?" she asked. "Yes." "For how long?" 3 years. "No windows." "No need." "No scent of home." Emil's lips twitched. "I don't collect things." She didn't smile, but she tilted her head slightly, like she'd caught the edge of something unsaid. Her white hair had begun to dry at the tips, revealing a shimmer of iridescent strands beneath the dirt. Not synthetic, biological. "Your name?" she asked. "Emil." "That's human." "Yes." "I wasn't allowed to keep mine." I'm not here to take it from you. A pause. Soreli, she said. He nodded once. Thank you. Another pause. Why risk yourself, she asked. His throat tightened. He set his bowl down gently. Because I saw you, he said, and didn't look away. That's not an answer. No, he agreed. It's not. Her eyes narrowed, calculating. But her body, he noticed, had eased slightly. Her knees no longer pressed to her chest. Her hand had loosened around the bowl. You're not afraid I'll steal from you? No. Kill you? No. Report you? I've already broken protocol. She watched him for a long time. You talk like you used to be someone important, she said. I was, he said, until I thought understanding someone gave me the right to define them. She blinked slowly. That apparently she understood. Emil stood and pulled down a folded blanket from a shelf above the cot. He laid it out across the mattress, smoothed the wrinkles. I'll sleep on the mat, he said. You take the cot. You can leave whenever you want, or stay. I won't touch you. Soreli didn't move. He turned off the overhead light, leaving the faint glow from the heat duct. Then he lay on the mat facing the wall, hands under his head, listening. Nothing. Then a quiet shift. Fabric brushing fabric. A step. The cot creaked. She didn't lie down right away. Just sat. Then gradually the sound of her breath changed. Slower. Fuller. I don't remember the last time I chose where to sleep, she whispered. You did tonight. Another silence. Then softer. Will it cost me later? No, Emil said. It won't. And for the first time in years, he believed it. When Emil woke, it was to the sound of breathing that wasn't his. For a moment, he didn't move. The warmth from the floor mat lingered in his limbs, and the quiet around him was thick, almost padded. No alarm, no voice feed, no intrusions from the comm relay. Just the sound of soft, steady inhalation, the kind of sleep that only came when someone stopped expecting pain. He turned his head slowly. Soreli was curled on the cot, her knees tucked to her chest beneath the thermal blanket. A strand of her long white hair had fallen across her cheek. She was facing him, though he doubted she was aware of it. Her mouth parted slightly with each breath, and her fingers were balled in the fabric, like she feared it might vanish if she let go. He sat up, moved quietly to the food unit and keyed in 2 more servings. This time, warmed nutrient wraps and protein tea. It was still early. Too early for foot traffic or drone patrols. The quiet had not yet broken. When the scent reached her, Soreli stirred. Her eyes opened fast, wide and clear. Not fogged with sleep, trained by fear. She scanned the room, found him, assessed the door. Her hand went to her side instinctively, where a weapon might have once been. You slept, he said gently, not moving. She blinked. I didn't mean to. That's okay. Soreli sat up slowly, still wrapped in the blanket. She didn't speak again until she caught the steam curling from the teacup beside her. Is that for me? Yes. Why? Because hunger doesn't make you easier to control. She stared at him for a long second, then silently reached for the cup. This time she drank slower. The first bite of food made her pause mid-chew. She swallowed hard. Her throat moved like it wasn't used to functioning under warmth, like even digestion had been taught to shrink. You said you studied people like me, she said. I did. Did we seem broken? Emil hesitated. No, he said at last. You seemed abandoned. Her hand tightened around the tea. She didn't respond. Where were you before? He asked. Silence. I'm not asking for details, he added. Only what you want to say. She looked down at her food, then back up. There were buyers, she said. One bought, one didn't. One tried, one took. I kept being transferred. I malfunctioned once, disobeyed a sleep command. That's when they left me. No new handlers came. Emil stayed quiet. I asked a man once for food, she said. He laughed. He gave me something. It was a tube of cleanser, industrial. I drank it because I thought it was nutrition paste. Her voice didn't tremble. It was too dry for that, like all the water in her soul had already been burned out. He looked at her directly. I'm sorry. She blinked, slow. You weren't there. I was in a way. I taught people how to see suffering. And I never asked if they caused it after the exam ended. She tilted her head. So this is redemption? No, he said quietly. This is repair. Sorelli looked at him a long time, then turned away, but her body didn't tense. That was something. Later that day, he let her shower. He set the timer, explained how the temperature controls worked, and stepped out. When she emerged, wrapped in the dry half of the blanket, steam trailing from her skin, her hair looked almost like spun glass. Clean, she looked even less human, but somehow more whole. She didn't speak as she passed him, but she didn't avoid his gaze. That night, she asked if she could sit near the heater. He nodded, sat with her. They didn't touch. But when she fell asleep sitting up, her head dipped slightly toward him, he didn't move away. And in the half-light of the failing habitat ring, Emil didn't feel like a failure. For the first time in years, he felt like a man. The first time Sorelli reached for him without flinching, it wasn't for comfort, it was to steady herself. She'd stepped out of the cleanser unit too fast, knees locking as she shifted her weight. The warmth of the water had loosened something in her muscles, but it left her legs shaky, unfamiliar. Her hand brushed his chest to catch balance, and she immediately recoiled like she'd burned herself. Emil didn't move, didn't react, just stood there with the towel still in his hands, waiting. She looked up at him, as if surprised he hadn't grabbed her, hadn't taken the contact as permission for more. Her eyes held that stunned, static fear he was learning to read, the pause before panic. "It's okay," he said softly. "You touched me, that's all." Sorelli lowered her gaze. "I didn't mean to. You don't have to explain." But she did, because that's what she'd been built for. That night, she didn't lie down right away. She sat on the floor, facing the wall vent, her back to the cot she had finally started to use. Emil brewed tea again, just for the smell this time, just to fill the room with something other than silence and recycled air. "You want to know where I'm from," she said, watching the steam curl along the edge of the vent. "I won't ask." "Good," she murmured. "I'll tell you anyway." Emil remained where he was, on the mat, elbows on his knees, body angled toward her, but not encroaching. "There was a planet," she said. "No name anymore. It used to have one a long time ago, but it was stripped from the records after the export program began. They called us Cellar units. Not species, not people. Units." He felt the name land like a coded strike. Cellar. He'd seen it once, buried in a sealed file, behind 2 levels of biometric clearance. "They bred us in sequence," she went on. "Generations layered through synthetic gestation. Beauty, obedience, pain resistance. The triple sequence. We weren't born to mothers. We were issued. Aesthetic value determined function. If your pigment was unstable, or your eyes too narrow, you were downgraded." Emil's throat tightened, but he said nothing. "Some of us were given vocal modules. Others were not. I was one of the last generation to be dual-coded, verbal fluency and emotion dampening. I failed the second half." "Because you felt?" She looked over. Her gaze was sharp, not wounded. "Because I spoke when I wasn't told to." She reached for the tea, took a small sip, then set it down again. "I asked a senator once what his wife's name was," she said. "That's what got me pulled from formal rotation. After that, I was moved through private markets, trade auctions, 1 companion buyer, 2 hospitality syndicates. I ran from the last one." Emil exhaled through his nose. "And the drain pipe?" "Lower tech. Easier to disappear. The polished corridors had eyes." They sat for a while in the quiet, not speaking. The air vents hummed a soft lull behind them. Then she shifted her weight, pulling her knees to her chest. Her hand brushed the blanket again. This time she didn't yank it tighter, just rested her fingers there. "And you?" she asked. "What did you do?" He didn't answer right away. Not to avoid the truth. He'd carried it too long to fear it. But because saying it meant surrendering a part of himself that had always tried to rationalize what he'd done. "I designed empathy protocols," he said. "Cross-species, neurohaptic interfacing, for trauma recovery and behavioral alignment." Sorelli tilted her head. "That's why you knew how to talk to me." "No," Emil said quietly. "That's why I thought I did." She watched him. "I didn't understand you," he went on. "Not really. I understood the patterns, the signs of distress, the rhythm of silence, the ways certain species protect themselves when they can't speak. I measured those things. I wrote papers about them, but I never asked what any of it felt like. Her eyes softened almost imperceptibly. There was one project, he said, a restricted facility, mixed species recovery center. I used unauthorized mapping tech, cognitive touch scans. Not invasive, but intimate. Too intimate. I was trying to find the neural roots of trust. And they punished you? They should have. But you didn't hurt anyone. I watched them heal without ever asking what they needed. I told myself it was science. Sorelli's voice was quiet. You were taught to observe. I was taught to obey. We both forgot to feel. He looked at her. Not to analyze, not to interpret, just to see. She didn't flinch this time. When she lay down later, it was closer to the heater and closer to him. Still no contact, but her hands slipped from the blanket and rested on the floor between them, palm open. A small, deliberate gesture. Emil didn't touch it, but he turned onto his side, mirrored the movement. 2 hands on cold metal, inches apart. It wasn't touch, but it was something, and neither of them looked away. The kiss didn't erase her history. It didn't fix what had been broken or unteach the obedience that still lived in her bones. But it changed something deeper. It gave her language for things that had always been silent. Sorelli didn't pull away. She didn't apologize. She simply breathed, resting her forehead against his chest as if finding something sacred in stillness. Emil stood there, arms loose at his sides, heart hammering. He didn't move to touch her, not yet, not until she did. Her voice, when it came, was quiet but clear. I've never kissed someone I chose. I don't know what comes next. You don't have to know, he said. We figure it out together. That word again. Together. It still startled her. Later they sat near the heat vent, drinking broth in silence. Sorelli had stopped asking if everything had a price, but Emil knew she still looked for hidden costs, in glances, in gestures, in the way someone's kindness might suddenly bend sharp. She watched his hands, his posture, the breath between his words. So far, they hadn't failed her. It was during that soft quiet that it happened. The screen on Emil's wall unit blinked twice, then turned red. Incoming signal, encrypted. He tapped it open, frowning. The message was short, a data ping with no sender ID. Retrieval order confirmed. High-value bio unit missing. Search initiated. His stomach dropped. They found you, he whispered. Sorelli didn't react. Her spoon paused halfway to her lips. Are they close? I don't know, but they're not broadcasting a general sweep this time. This is targeted. Then I have to go. You don't, he said too quickly. She turned to him, unreadable. You're already in danger. I don't care. You should. He set down the bowl, heart pounding louder than the hum of the heater. You're not a thing to be returned. You're not data to be claimed. I won't let them undo you. And what will you do? She asked. Hide me forever? Let them hunt you until they find both of us? If that's the cost, I'll pay it. She stared at him like she was seeing someone new, someone irrational, someone impossible. Then she shook her head. You don't understand. If they take me, they won't just erase memory. They'll resequence, strip identity. I won't be Sorelli anymore. I won't know you. I won't remember that I ran. He stepped forward. Then we don't let them. A beat passed. Then she reached for his hand. It was the first time she initiated contact without fear. Her fingers slipped between his, firm and certain. I've survived 1,000 rooms built to make me silent, she said. But you made me speak. Not made, he whispered. Invited. The door alarm chirped. Proximity alert. Sorelli's grip tightened. Security patrol, he said. Maybe random. It's never random. Emil crossed the room, pulled a crate aside, revealing the old emergency hatch behind it. This still works, leads to sub-level 3. Power's unstable, but it hasn't been mapped in years. And you? I'll buy time. No. Her voice was sharp now, commanding. He turned. She was already by the door, hand on the lock override. Her body trembled, not from fear but from choice. If they come in, she said, don't lie for me. Don't protect me. I already did. She stepped toward him. Then let me protect you now. The outer hallway clanged. Boots. Two voices. They were close. We don't have time. Sorelli kissed him again. Urgent. Fierce. It wasn't delicate. It wasn't gentle. It was everything she hadn't been allowed to feel. Anger, love, defiance, need. He returned it with equal fire. When they parted breathless, she rested her forehead to his. I would rather be hunted with you, she said, than erased without you. Then she opened the hatch, slipped into the vent, and vanished. Emil turned to the door just as the override was forced. Two officers stormed in, weapons drawn. Their visors glinted with soft green light. One raised a scanner. The other locked eyes with him. Unauthorized biological trace detected, the taller one said. I've got mold in the vents, Emil said flatly. You want to swab it? They didn't laugh. The scanner beeped. The tall one stepped closer. You've been flagged for data withholding. Step aside. Emil stood his ground. Nothing here but me, he said. Behind him, the vent cover clicked softly shut. You can scan every inch, he added, but you won't find what you're looking for. The scanner pulsed, then died. Power interference, one muttered. Low-level scramble, the other guessed. Deliberate. Then maybe your equipment's broken, Emil said, staring him down. They glared at him for a long, silent moment. Then without a word turned and left. He stood still long after the door shut, listening to his own heartbeat. Waiting. The hatch stayed closed. She hadn't come back, but she was free, and that for now was enough. The silence after the patrol left was absolute. Not the kind of stillness Emil had grown used to on Solace Ring 11, but a different kind, tighter, more fragile. It was the silence left behind when something vital is no longer in the room. Sorelli was gone. He stood motionless for a long time, eyes fixed on the vent hatch, half expecting her to return. She didn't. The air still smelled faintly of the broth they'd shared, the steam already fading into cold. Her blanket was folded neatly on the cot. Not abandoned, chosen. Emil sat on the edge of the bed and buried his face in his hands. He wasn't afraid for her. Not exactly. Sorelli didn't break. She didn't panic. She had survived design, ownership, exile. She would survive this too. But surviving wasn't the same as being safe. That thought haunted him. He spent the next 3 days under tight watch. No charges filed, no formal interrogation, just unspoken pressure. A quiet quarantine of bureaucracy. It was worse than a cell. The waiting, the uncertainty. It was designed to wear a man down. But Emil didn't break either. When he was released, they called it clearance reassignment, a euphemism for professional exile. He no longer had access to the research servers. His credentials were flagged as limited. They offered him a single shuttle ride off Solace Ring. No questions, no return. He didn't ask where it was going, but the moment he stepped into Dock 4, he knew he wasn't alone. She was there, not hiding, not waiting in the shadows, standing upright, framed by the entrance ramp of a civilian-class vessel. Her hair was braided, her stance relaxed but watchful. She wore real clothes, hers, chosen, not assigned. And when she saw him, she smiled. Not the polite curve of a trained companion. A real smile. Software. Meant only for him. I thought I'd find you on foot, Emil said. I thought you'd come out in chains, she replied. He stepped closer. You okay? She nodded. I've been worse. I've been better. But right now, I'm okay. He exhaled. The tension in his chest, the weight of uncertainty finally loosened. How did you? A contact from the lower rings owed me a favor, she said. I cashed it in. Got a ship. Got registered. They let you file identity. They couldn't stop me. Not after what you did. The investigation backfired. Too much attention. Too many data holes. They covered it up instead. Emil stared at her. You planned this. I hoped for it. She held out a datapad. A form blinked on the screen. Civilian partnership application. Her name already filled in. I forged nothing. I ran no code. This is legal. They'll honor it if we both sign. He took the pad, scanned the lines, looked up at her. You're serious? Deadly? Emil's throat tightened. You don't have to do this. I know. You could live free, alone, safe. I don't want to be safe, she said. I want to be known. His hands were shaking slightly as he reached for the stylus. She stopped him. Don't do this for me, she said. Do it for you. Because if I'm yours, then you're mine. He met her gaze, then he signed. The console pinged. Confirmation accepted. The bond was official. When the ship lifted off, the artificial gravity adjusted slowly. Emil didn't even notice. He sat beside her on the narrow bench, their knees touching, the future uncertain, but theirs. She reached for his hand. This time, neither of them let go. The stars outside the viewport didn't shine. They burned, distant, pulsing, indifferent. Sorelli watched them in silence, her body still beneath the thin blanket that rested on her lap. The ship's cabin was quiet, except for the soft thrum of the engines and the occasional metallic creak as the vessel adjusted to drift speed. Emil sat beside her, elbow against the narrow armrest, head tilted back against the wall. They hadn't spoken much since liftoff, not because there was nothing to say, but because they both knew silence wasn't empty anymore. It was shared. She turned slightly toward him. We're really not going back. No, he said, eyes half closed. Not unless we want to. The console behind them hummed. The bond confirmation had gone through. They were registered now, not as guardian and dependent, not as patient and protector. Just two people who'd chosen to be seen as one unit in a galaxy that rarely allowed such things. Sorelli leaned her head against his shoulder, slow and deliberate. No flinch, no hesitation, just warmth. For a long time, neither of them moved. Then softly she spoke. Do you remember the first thing I said to you? He smiled faintly. You said, I wasn't begging. And I wasn't. I know. But I was hoping, she said, and that was harder to admit. Emil turned, brushing a strand of her white hair from her cheek. I hoped too. I just didn't believe I deserved to. You didn't ask for me. No, but you stayed. I always would have, he said, even if you hadn't kissed me, even if you had left without a word. Her voice dropped to a murmur. I almost did. He didn't press. He didn't ask why she hadn't. Instead, he let his hand find hers. Their fingers twined together slowly, like vines seeking warmth. I used to think I was made to be quiet, she whispered, to be pretty and still and nothing else. But you didn't see me that way. I saw someone who wanted to choose. I saw someone who didn't treat silence as surrender. He looked at her then, not just with love, but with certainty. You've always been more than what they made you for. She breathed deeply, letting the words settle like gravity around her bones. I used to be afraid of sleep, she said. Now I just rest. You're safe here. She smiled again, smaller this time, but real, and she believed him. Their ship, the Emberline, was set on a steady trajectory toward a civilian outpost near the Neros expanse. Quiet, out of reach, legally neutral. They'd filed for a joint resettlement visa. It would take weeks to process, months to clear them for land rights. They didn't care. They had time now. In the weeks that followed, the days blurred gently. Quiet meals, long walks through the cargo bay, Sorelli experimenting with small pleasures, hot drinks, loose clothes, music played low. Emil repaired the comm array by hand. She insisted on helping, despite having never held a soldering wand before. He taught her, patiently. She learned fast. One morning, she painted the ship's interior wall with a soft gray pigment from a mineral pack they'd salvaged from the lower hold. Not because it needed color, but because she wanted it. He didn't ask what it meant. She didn't need to explain. One night while they watched the nav screen chart their course, she said, I want to grow things. Plants? Maybe animals. Maybe something new. He nodded slowly. Then that's what we'll do. And just like that, the future unfolded. Not as a plan, but as a possibility. The day they received confirmation of their bonded status was uneventful. Just a data packet blinking on the console. The file read, civilian pairing, Thorn, Emil plus Sorelli, self-registered. Status, approved region, open colonization rights, pending settlement. There was no ceremony, no flag raised, just two people, sitting shoulder to shoulder, breathing the same air without fear. He kissed her softly. She kissed him back. And when she smiled into his mouth, it wasn't for what they'd survived. It was for what they'd become. Not rescued, not rebuilt, just free. Together. The morning began with the sound of rain. Not real rain. This wasn't a planet. But Sorelli had programmed the simulation into the ship's ambient system 3 nights ago, just to see if it would make waking softer. It did. The sound curled gently through the cabin, a rhythmic pattern of droplets tapping against invisible windows. It reminded her of something she'd never actually experienced, only imagined. Open sky, wet soil, something green growing where no one had ordered it to. She stirred slowly. The blanket twisted at her hips, warmth pooling between her and the man still asleep beside her. Emil's chest rose and fell with the kind of peace she used to think only belonged to others. One of his hands was curled near her shoulder, as if even in sleep he was reaching for her. She watched him for a while, quietly the way she had that first morning after they'd run. Only now there was no fear, no urgency, just him and her, and the gentle realization that this day didn't need to be survived. It could simply be lived. She slid out of bed and padded barefoot to the galley, wrapped in one of his shirts. The sleeves were too long, and the hem brushed her knees. She liked the way it felt, claimed and comfortable, not like a uniform or a costume. Her hair was unbraided, loose, cascading down her back like a slow-moving waterfall. She didn't bother to pin it today. There was no one to impress. She made tea. Strong, dark, a little sweet. By the time Emil emerged, barefoot, rumpled, blinking blearily, she had breakfast waiting. Fresh protein bread, rehydrated fruit slices, hot water steeped with citrus root. The air still carried the sound of that soft, fabricated rain, and the warmth from the galley heater bathed the room in a golden hue. He stopped when he saw her. Just looked, like the sight of her standing there, alive, well, radiant in worn cotton, was still something he didn't fully believe. "You're staring," she said, sipping her tea. "Every time I wake up next to you, I keep thinking the world's going to demand something cruel in return." "And has it?" "Not yet." "Then maybe it never will." She walked to him, handed him a mug, kissed the corner of his mouth. "Today we're not fixing anything, not hiding, not building or preparing. We just live." He nodded. A rest day. A day meant to last. They ate on the floor by the window. Sorelli had installed a screen there that mimicked the view of a forest canopy from below. Dappled green light filtered across their legs and arms like they were lying beneath something alive. Emil finished his bread and lay back, arms behind his head. "What would you have done if none of this had happened? If you'd been born free?" She didn't answer right away. "I used to think I'd want to be a pilot," she said at last. "Move fast, choose my own direction. But now, I'd keep a garden, not for survival, just because I could." He smiled. "We can make that happen." Later they played music. Sorelli danced, awkward at first, then more fluid, letting herself move, not with grace, but with feeling. Emil joined her, laughing as they bumped into furniture, spun too fast, collapsed on the cot in a heap of tangled limbs and breathless joy. In the quiet that followed, she traced the scar on his shoulder with her fingertip. "What's this from?" she asked. "Fell off a ladder," he said, "trying to fix a sensor that wasn't broken. I was young, arrogant, thought everything needed me." "You're still needed," she whispered, "not to fix things, numbered just to be." That evening they cooked dinner together. Real food, roots, herbs, vegetables grown from seed in the compact biopod she'd installed 3 weeks earlier. It wasn't much, but it was theirs. The stew bubbled gently on the heat coil, and when they ate, neither of them said a word. Not because there was nothing to say, but because everything they needed was already present. Afterward, they lay in bed again, bare skin against bare skin, not out of desire, but out of trust. Sorelli rested her head on Emil's chest, listening to his heartbeat. "Tell me something true," she said. "I love you." "Something else." "I would do it all again. Every risk, every minute." She closed her eyes. Outside the viewport, the stars didn't blink. They burned steady, old and infinite. But inside their little ship, time had paused. The galaxy could wait. This was theirs.